I think I am speaking to become honors first year students. This is your general elective introductory microeconomics course. I'm sorry that the previous two classes could not be held uh, uh, in a technical manner. That I hope that the technical team will be providing you audio copies of my previous two lectures for people who are already initiated into this subject, or probably you might have already got a copy of the audio lecture. Uh, Let me briefly tell you about what we have already covered so far. I had introduced economics as a subject, what economics is about, and what are the economic problems, what our economic system is like, and what exactly is the subject matter of economics. And with that, we went over to certain basic concepts in economics, which will find useful further into the subject. One was we discussed the concept of opportunity cost, which briefly speaking is the next best alternative which you sacrifice while exercising your choice when you have to choose between several options. For example, if you have four options, say A, B, C, and D. So A gives you the maximum returns, B gives you less returns than A, C gives you less return than B, and D gives you less returns than C. Now, if you're choosing A, then the opportunity cost for you is the return that you are getting from B. Now, why this opportunity cost is important, that you will realize as we move further into demand and supply analysis and so on. Then I had moved over to production possibility frontier. Now, what production possibility frontier or curve does is it represents a combination of amounts of two goods which can be produced in an economy given resources and technology. I hope that you are able to see this document. So I have this production possibility curve. The diagram is here. You can see that the shape of the production possibility frontier or curve is concave to the origin and convex outwards. Okay, so concave to the origin means that at each point on the curve, you might see that the angle at which the curve is bending, it is towards the origin, this point. So these are the two axes. Now, I think I should not have delved into basic mathematics here, but still, if somebody is finding this really new, these are the two number axis. Along x-axis, we represent numbers, and along y-axis, we represent numbers. Now, these numbers can represent the quantity of anything you would like to represent on the axis. Okay, so now this angle is a 90-degree angle. This curve is facing towards the 90-degree angle. That is, if you say, if you are moving from A to B, you can see this bend. This bend is facing towards the curve. So This we call concave. Now, this point, as you see, point A is representing, say, 200 units of output of wheat and 300 units of output of cotton. So we have represented here amount of wheat that can be produced by the economy and amount of cotton that can be produced by the economy at a given point of time, when we assume that the total resources in the economy are constant and technology is also at the same level of development. Fine. Now, what the shape of the curve represents is, first of all, it is downward sloping from the vertical axis to the horizontal axis. As you have already said, it is downward sloping. Okay, it's bending from y-axis to the x-axis. Now, what this means in terms of the trade-off between wheat and cotton is that when you are increasing the amount of cotton, then you have to reduce the amount of wheat. So if you want to produce more cotton, then you have to reduce the amount of wheat which you are producing. You can't, on the production possibility curve. Okay, on the production possibility curve means this line from here to here. So all these points from here to here, these are on the production possibility curve. And this point here, it is inside the production possibility curve. And this point here is outside the production possibility curve. So all the points on the production possibility curve will have this property that if you increase the amount of one commodity which is represented on the horizontal axis, then you have to reduce the amount of the other commodity which is being represented on the vertical axis. So this implies that as more of cotton produced, less of wheat will be produced on the PPF. The curve is concave towards the origin point of the axis in the graph. That is, at each point on the curve, it bends towards the origin. This means what its mathematical significance is, it is that the slope of the curve increases as we move downwards on the curve. So if you want a primer on what slope is, you may look at trigonometry, basic trigonometry in your 9th or 10th standard mathematics books, or you can search over the internet. Basically, slope is, if you imagine that this AB is not a curve but a straight line. This straight line we'll have two angles. Apart from this 90-degree angle, we'll have two angles. One is here and one is here. Okay. So now this angle that this line makes with the horizontal axis, it represents the degree of the bend of this line towards the horizontal axis. Okay, so how to measure that degree of that bend? That is represented by the slope, and in mathematics, it is simply the length of this vertical axis upon this horizontal axis for a straight line. Because I'm unable to draw this. This line is already pasted into this document, so I really can't change it right now. Okay, towards the end of the class, maybe I will take up the whiteboard and try to draw straight lines as straight as it is possible, and then explain to you what slope means in case you have forgotten. So slope is basically, slope of any angle is basically the ratio of the length of the side opposite to it upon the length of the side adjacent to it. Okay, so any angle will have two sides. Okay, and if you draw a vertical line across the two sides such that the third angle is a 90-degree angle, then you will get two segments, the vertical segments upon the horizontal segment. That is the slope of the angle. So this slope is nothing but the ratio of change in amount of wheat produced to the change in amount of cotton produced. Okay, if it is a straight line, then this ratio will be constant everywhere. Okay, because on the straight line the slope is same everywhere. Fine. So if this production possibility frontier had been a straight line instead of being a curve, then it is very simple to find out what this rate of change is. Okay, you can simply find the length of the y-intercept and length of the x-intercept, find their ratio, and that will give you the slope for all the points on the line. Okay, but in case of a curve, the angle at which the curve is bending changes at each point. So the slope of the curve is also changing at each point. So now how do we calculate the slope of a curve in this case? So what we do, we take two points very close, say point A and point B. You can see that this length AB is almost like a straight line. It's not exactly a straight line, but almost like a straight line. So now if I talk about this angle, the slope of this angle is the ratio of this segment and this segment. Okay, so segment upon this segment. This is the slope of this angle AB, say let's term this as point C. So the slope of angle ABC is this segment AC upon CB. Okay, now what exactly is AC here? Now let's see. At B we have 160 units of say wheat and 160 units of cotton here. Now at point A we have 200 units of wheat and 300 units of cotton. Now when moving from A to B, the change in the production of wheat is how much? It is from 200 to 160, which is 40 units. Okay, so the length of this segment is 40. Similarly, where at point B, the change in amount of cotton is from 300 to 400, which is plus 100. So the length of this segment, which represents the change in amount of cotton, is 100 units. So what is the slope of this angle? This is nothing but 40 by 100, which is, yeah. So that way we calculate the slope. Now if you take another point C here and then calculate the slope of the line here in a similar fashion, you will find that this slope will be definitely different from the slope at point B. Okay, so at each point, by taking another point very close to that point, we can calculate the slope of the production possibility frontier, and that slope is nothing but the ratio of change in the amount of the commodity represented on y-axis to the change in amount of the commodity represented on the x-axis. Here, the amount represented on the y-axis is wheat, and the amount represented on the x-axis is cotton. So, how production possibility frontier explains the concept of opportunity cost? So, in terms of opportunity cost, it means that the opportunity cost of producing cotton in terms of the production of wheat that is given up increases for every additional unit of cotton produced. Okay. Here, you see here that from A to B, the slope is 40 by 100, whereas from B to C, the slope is how much? The change in production of wheat is 80 units and the change in production of cotton is 100 units. So at point C, the change per unit of change in C is how much? This is 80 units upon 100 units. But here it is 40 units upon 100 units. So from moving from A to B, you are sacrificing for the same 100 units, you are sacrificing 40 units of wheat. In moving from B to C, for an additional 100 units of cotton, you are sacrificing 80 units of wheat. Okay, so that means in terms of opportunity cost, you are sacrificing more and more units of wheat to produce the same amount of additional unit of cotton. Is that clear? So that is per unit how much you are sacrificing wheat for per unit increase of cotton. So that is actually increasing. Okay. Now you can answer this question intuitively if you have understood so far. How will the opportunity cost vary if the production possibility frontier is a straight line? So you can answer this question through the chat section, and in the next class I will take up your answers for discussion. Now the hint is also given here that the slope of a straight line is constant at all points. Okay, so I missed. Now this ratio of change in amount of the good represented on the y-axis to the change in amount of good represented on the x-axis is called the marginal rate of transformation, that is MRT, which is also the marginal opportunity cost of good in terms of good y. Okay, so we can either call it marginal rate of transformation or the marginal opportunity cost of good in terms of good y. So how diminishing returns is represented on the production possibility frontier is clear from the same diagram. You can see that when you are diverting your resources from producing say 300 units to 400 units from here to here, you are giving off 40 units from A to B of wheat. But from B to C, you are giving up 80 units for same addition to the production of cotton, which is again 100 units. That means from A to B, you are sacrificing less units of wheat than in moving from B to C, which is 80 units. This means that for the same increase in output of cotton, you are devoting more and more resources as you are moving from the vertical axis to the horizontal axis. So when you are increasing the total amount of production of cotton, the incremental sacrifice of the other commodity which you are making to increase the production of cotton also increases, and that is because of diminishing returns, because the resources employed in the production of cotton are giving you less and less returns, so that for the same amount of increase in cotton, you have to now devote more and more resources. Okay, and this is the principle of diminishing returns, that when you have to use more and more of a factor to a productive process, the increase in output to each additional unit of the factor actually diminishes. Okay. We will take up diminishing returns later when we go deep into the theory of supply or theory of production. Now, as far as the whole economy is concerned, the importance of the production possibility frontier is in showing whether an economy is operating efficiently or not. Okay. Now, by assumption, by your definition, let's go to the origin. By definition, it represents the combination of amounts of two goods which can be produced in an economy given resources and technology. Fine. Now look at this point here on the x-axis where the curve is joining the x-axis. This point represents 0 unit of wheat and the maximum unit of cotton. Similarly, this point represents maximum unit of wheat and 0 units of cotton. So this segment is the maximum amount of wheat that can be produced if all the resources in the economy were devoted to the production of wheat. Then the maximum amount that you will produce is this segment. Similarly, if all the resources were devoted to production of cotton, the maximum amount of cotton that you will produce is this segment. Fine. So since these two represent maximum amounts of cotton and wheat respectively, and all these points on the production possibility frontier are equivalent to these points in terms of the value of production. So you can say that all these points are equally efficient. On the production possibility frontier, all these points are equally efficient. And that is why if we are increasing the amount of production of one commodity, then you have to diminish the amount produced of the other community, because you can't because the economy is already at an efficient level and all the resources are exhausted. So you cannot increase the amount of two goods together. Okay. So all these points on the production possibility frontier, A, B, C, they represent the full exhaustion of resources of the economy. So they are the efficient points. Whereas, look at point D and E here, which lie inside this area covered by the production possibility frontier along with the axis. Okay, the area enclosed by the axis and the production possibility frontier consist of all the points which represent inefficient production combinations. At point E, for example, you can increase for the same amount of cotton, you can increase the amount of wheat upwards, or you can increase the amount of cotton rightwards. At point D, similarly, you can increase the amount of wheat up till here, or you can increase the amount of cotton up till here. Without sacrificing the amount of the other good, you can increase the amount of the second good. Okay, so this means that how is this possible? This is possible because at this point there are some resources which are lying unutilized. So if the unutilized resources are all utilized in increasing the production of one commodity while keeping the amount of the other commodity constant, we are still getting total increased value of production. Okay, so that means for all these points inside this area, there is always a scope to increase the production of one good or the other without sacrificing any unit of the other good. Fine. So these points are inefficient points. Similarly, consider the point F, which is outside the production possibility frontier. Now, what about this point? This point represents a combination of the two goods which cannot be attained given the resources and technology. Fine. Now, to move towards this point, what is required? What is required is more resources or advancement in technology or both. Fine. Because from moving from here to here, you are increasing production of both cotton and production of wheat as well. So when you are increasing production of both the goods while the resources are limited, this is actually technically impossible to produce both the goods simultaneously. To increase the production of both the goods simultaneously, you will definitely need more resources, or you will need a technology which will alter the use of resources in such a way that they are more productive. More productive means for per unit of factor, all the factors used in production process, now the incremental output will be more, so that you can, even if the resources are the same, by adopting a different technology, which is nothing but a different kind of production process in which factors are combined differently, you can increase production of both the commodities. Fine. So when we are shifting from here to here, the production possibility will pass through F or will not touch the production possibility frontier at all. So when we move from any point on the production possibility frontier, say B, A or C, to a point F, then this is called a shift in the production function. Okay, so a shift in the production function happens when you are able to increase the production of one commodity while increasing the other production of the other commodity as well, or keeping it constant. So when this happens, we can say that the production possibility curve was shifted. So here I have summarized the same thing which I have been discussing all along. Now, to attain these combinations outside the production possibility frontier, what you can do is first technical advancement, then discovery of new resources. So now you will remember that, to summarize, you'll remember that the shape of the production possibility frontier is downward sloping from vertical axis to horizontal axis, then concave towards the origin, and the assumption in drawing the production possibility frontier is that resources and technology are constant at the given point of time. You will find more use of this particular concept in international trade when we are discussing gains from trade, which for the time being is not our concern. Now we will move to a discussion of the market economy, because there is one introductory class which I've already taken, in which I threw light of an certain basic assumption of the consumption theory. Before that, we need to know why we are discussing consumption theory in the first place. Now, economics is the study of livelihoods of the people, about how people go about meeting their material needs for sustenance of life. So basically, when what you mean, what do you do when you are living a life? To maintain your life, you need all your basic stuff, food, clothing, shelter, and everything. So when you are using these things, so they are getting consumed, isn't it? So in the end, any kind of economic activities is consumption only. So whatever you are doing, it ends up in consumption. Fine. Now, when we are saying sustenance of life, we need a numerous variety of things to sustain life. As such, every individual has numerous wants, but the society has limited resources. Fine. So as the society keeps expanding, the population keeps increasing, the relative shortage of resources to the wants keeps on increasing. So in a way, economics is also the study of how society manages its scarce resources. In most societies, resources are allocated not by an all-powerful dictator, but through the combined actions of millions of households and farms. This is actually straight away taken from your prescribed textbook. I thought it would be good to note it down here. The word economy comes from the Greek word oikonomos, which means one who manages a household. Fine. Now, why household has been related to the economy as a whole? Because basically economy runs along the same principle as a household is run. The management of society's resources is important because resources are scarce, and scarcity means that society has limited resources and therefore cannot produce all the goods and services that all the people wish to have. So just as in a household, you have to ration your monthly income or yearly income between the needs of different family members. Similarly, you have to ration the total resources of the economy between several demands or demands of several groups of people. Now, the basic economic activities arising from this scarcity versus limited resources need are production and consumption. In large and complex economic system, we have two more important economic activities, which we call as distribution and investment. Because in large economic systems, you cannot have face-to-face exchange of goods and services, that the producer cannot directly go to the consumers who are needing his produce. Fine. So when economy is very large and very complex, so distribution itself becomes a challenging task. And then investment is needed, because all that we earn or all that we produce, we do not consume all at once. Okay. So especially when the human society is progressing, we are always producing a surplus over and above what we need immediately. So there are lots of stuff that we produce which we don't need to consume immediately, but we might need them in the future. So as such, we need to save for contingencies, for future needs, and so on. But then there are certain things which cannot be saved forever. Fine. So these savings, if they're invested, just like you think about the farmer, okay, he saves when he harvests the crop, a part of the crop he keeps for his own consumption, and another part he will either sell in the market or he will keep that for producing the next crop, and that in itself is a activity of investment. Okay, so investment is important to keep the flow of income going. Okay, so when we are producing, we are generating one-time income, but if we save a part of that income and use it for further production, then what we are doing is basically investment, and that keeps the flow of income in process. So not only we need to fulfill our current wants, but also we need to look after our future wants. So when it comes to attending to our future wants or future needs, we have to take care of our investment needs as well. Now, economic models are attempts to systematically study these real life economic activities in a precise manner. The producer units of the economy are called as firms, and the consumption units are called as households. Now, when you say households, households may consist of a single individual. It doesn't have to be a family always. So household represents simply consumption units. So consumption unit might be a single individual or a group of individuals, a family or a group of individuals living like a family, or a big society which is living like a family, and so on. So it basically is about how we are looking upon consumption while we're calculating it. Okay. In a two-sector economy model, we have only two economic agents, the producing agent and the consuming agent. So we have only firms and households. In three-sector model, government is introduced as the third economic agent. Why the government? Because the government may directly participate in the productive process by setting up its say own firms, own factories, or it might affect the productive decisions of the firms by say imposing taxes or reducing taxes on the final products or the factors of production, or It might also directly participate in consumption process by making purchases from the public, or it might affect the consumption of the people by imposing, say, taxes on goods and services, income taxes, and so on. So the government activities is all pervasive and it affects all other economic agents in the economy. So the government is the third economic agent in a three-sector model, which influences the economic activities both directly and indirectly. In a four-sector model, the foreign trade sector is explored as the fourth agent. So whatever is the model, the basic economic problem underlying all economic activities is how to meet unlimited wants with limited or scarce resources. Since resources are limited, each economic agent is compelled to think of ways to maximize its benefit with the limited resources. So depending on the political arrangements, different economies have different ways to arrive at such economic decisions. We will first start with a market-oriented economy. Now, what happens in a market-oriented economy is that the distribution of resources is guided by the market behavior. Now, what do you understand by market behavior? So, market behavior simply means the movement of prices of different commodities, and not just commodities, but also factors of production. Because usually commodities, it depends on how you look at commodities, because usually commodities gives you the impression of only the consumption goods, or the goods and services meant for final consumption. So the prices of factors of production and the prices of commodities, that is in total the market behavior, and where the resources are moving, that depends on the movement of the prices. The direction of the prices, the direction of the movement of prices determines the direction of movement of the resources. The prices are in turn determined by the forces of demand and supply. The government abstains from any major interference in the pre-interaction of demand and supply forces in the market economy. Okay, in this type of economy, which is largely market oriented, the government observes the principle of least interference in business. Okay, its role is confined only to, say, major activities like maintaining the defense system, maintaining law and order, that is facilitating the economic activities of the other economic agents, and it will never directly interfere with their activities. In planned economies, the government takes the major decisions regarding production and sometimes consumption also, especially the ownership of productive resources or capital goods mostly lies with the governments. The consumption goods market may or may not be controlled or partially regulated in such economies. In mixed economies, the government gives a free hand to markets for certain goods while extending control over others as it perceives and as per requirement. So we'll begin with a two-sector model to look at how the forces of demand and supply are affecting the resource allocation, the overall resource allocation. Now this forces of demand and supply which we call market forces. They will determine the prices, but it is not a one-time process, because the prices will in turn also affect the demand and supply. So the cause and effect relationship between price and demand and between price and supply is always moving to and fro. First, say the demand and supply will raise the prices at a point of time. In the next phase, the prices may either raise the supply or raise the demand. So this keeps on happening, that first prices will increase, then demand will shift, then prices will shift further and supply will shift. So this process of change in demand and supply keeps on altering till we come to a situation when they are finally at equilibrium. That is, the forces are so balanced that there is no further increase in the prices, at least not in the short run. A market is a group of buyers and sellers of a particular good or service. Okay. Now, when we say market, it is always a market for a particular commodity or particular service. The demand agents are consumers or households, and the supply agents are farms, which I've already said before. The total market demand for a commodity is the sum total of all household demand for that commodity, whereas the total supply is the sum of supply of the commodity by all the firms engaged in its production. The supply-demand gap pulls down or raises the prices depending on which force is stronger. When demand exceeds supply, it would raise prices as consumers try to outcompete each other in offering prices for the commodity, which is sought in supply. When supply exceeds demand, then prices would be expected to come down. And this we will discuss in detail later on after covering consumption theory and production theory. Now, equilibrium prices are determined where supply meets demand. To know the equilibrium prices, therefore, we must first determine the market demand and market supply. So, how to derive the market demand? To derive the market demand, we will have to derive the individual consumers' demand first, because ultimately the market demand is the sum total of the individual consumers or households' demand. So to determine the demand behavior of the individual consumers or the households, we need to develop a theoretical model which is based on many psychological assumptions about the consumer's behavior. And among these psychological assumptions, to which I had introduced you in the very first class, is the assumption of rationality. Okay. Now, what rationality in economics means is that the rational economic agent always tries to maximize his or her benefits. Now, rational people systematically and purposefully do the best they can to achieve their objectives given the available opportunity. This is your textbook definition. So this means that whatever the situation, the rational people always try to get the best out of it. They try to gain the maximum advantage out of it. Okay. So this doesn't mean that we are always moving between black or white, that we'll always choose the extreme things, because maximization does not always come from choosing the things which are on the extreme, which are always on the high or always on the low. Fine. So benefits can be maximized on the margin. Now, this marginal thinking, benefiting at the margin, that is very peculiar to our subject, because what we assume is rational people know that decisions in life are rarely black and white, but usually involve shades of gray. Fine. So economists use the term marginal changes to describe small incremental adjustments to an existing plan of action. So marginal changes are adjustment around the edges of what you are doing, and rational people often make decisions by comparing marginal benefits and marginal cost. So this is a nice example again given in your reference book. You can take a look at this. I'll just briefly explain this. So the example is of your airline tickets. Now suppose the average cost for a flight per seat is rupees 500. Fine. Now if the airline has to profit from that flight, the airline will definitely fix its rate for the flyers something above 500 rupees. Okay. But in a situation when the seats are lying vacant, fine. Suppose there are 10 or 20 seats lying vacant. Now the flight cannot be cancelled because there are other, say, if there are total of 100 seats, there are other 80 passengers for whom the flight has to be completed. So since the flight cannot be cancelled, so even if there is a loss to the airlines by taking up the flight, it will still take up the flight but try to minimize its losses. Now how it can minimize its losses is, instead of letting those seats go vacant, what it can do is that it can actually reduce the cost of ticket for those seats. Fine. So when it reduces the cost of those seats, maybe it might get some passengers to buy those tickets at the last minute. So thereby, say, even if it sells say 5 tickets at the last moment, it has still reduced its losses over 10 seats to 5 seats, isn't it? So here maximization of benefit consists in minimizing the losses. Right? So, and the loss is being minimized at the margin, at those seats which were remaining, those seats which were at the margin, which were not being sold. Fine. So this way the economists are maximizing their benefits and sometimes minimizing losses is in a way maximizing benefit. So there is another paradox which this marginal decision explains, is the diamond water paradox. So what is this diamond water paradox is? Now water is abundant, available everywhere. So it should come for free. But water is also very essential, isn't it? Something that we cannot live without. So you may think that since the necessity of water is much more than compared to that of the diamond, so water ought to be more pricey compared to the diamonds. But in real life, what we observe is diamond is so expensive and water is available for free. Now, why is that so? This is because of the marginal benefit, because the water is available in plenty. So the marginal benefit that you are deriving from consuming additional quantities of water, or even if you are purchasing it in a bottle, say mineral bottle, still then the marginal benefit is much less to you, because there is already plenty of water that you have consumed. So every additional unit seems to be of less value, because it is always available. You know, you can have water at any time you like, but at the same time diamonds are very rare. So since they are very rare, very hard to obtain, so every additional unit of diamond is very special. Okay, so at the margin, the diamonds are million times valuable than water. So that is why diamonds fetch such a high price where water is so cheap. So that is, I mean, you may challenge this explanation, but that is one way of looking at things, and this is the economist way of looking at this paradox. Because in real life also you can observe that a person's willingness to pay for any commodity or good is based on the marginal benefit that an extra unit of the good would yield. So when you are making purchases, you are not always looking at the total benefit. Okay, you are also looking at the marginal benefit and comparing with what sacrifice you are going to make for that obtaining that unit. So rationality means that each consumer tries to choose his purchase from limited money income such that his satisfaction is maximized. So rationality at the margin means that you are always making comparison between the benefit and the cost, the marginal benefit and the marginal cost. So translating it into consumers' behavior, rationality means that each consumer tries to choose his purchase such that the limited money income that he is spending is in a way that his total satisfaction is maximized. But when you say satisfaction, the satisfaction itself is a subjective entity. It varies from person to person. So it doesn't have a distinct measure or distinct outline. So how to measure because what we are trying to do in consumers' behavior is we are trying to determine basically how much of a commodity a consumer will demand at given prices and income. Fine. So given a certain amount of income that the consumer can spend and given the prices of the commodities, how much of different commodities he will buy or purchase. So that is basically the problem that we are looking at. Now, having said that, since the consumer is trying to maximize his satisfaction, so we need to measure satisfaction in some way so that we can mathematically calculate as to how he is going to distribute his income among various purchases. So to deal with this anomaly, one economist, Alfred Marshall, devised the concept of utility. Now, utility he defined as the want satisfied ability of a commodity. The want satisfying ability of a commodity. The more satisfying a commodity, the more is its utility. Now, when we are saying that measurement of satisfaction, we are now looking at measurement of utility. We'll deal with this in the next class. I think it's already time. For the time being, you may look at the chapter on consumer theory in your prescribed textbook, which is Introductory Microeconomics by A.K. Mankiw. The syllabus is on the school's website, on Delhi University's main website as well. And if you still have any doubt, you can consult me through chat. Thank you all.